Hello, my name is Harshini. I'm the advocacy coordinator here at Save the Dunes. I just want to say a big welcome to anyone listening to our coastal resiliency series. So this is our third now recorded coastal resiliency series. This one is going to be focused on protecting biodiversity. Just as to reiterate that this document and our series is possible by a grant from the NOAA, or National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and also through the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Lake Michigan Coastal Program. So a big thank you to them for helping us create this and for funding this program. So today, like I said, we're going to just continue our coastal resiliency series. So we've been focusing on a couple of different coastal resiliency topics over the past couple of months, such as living in the dunes, wetlands, and this one is going to be on protecting biodiversity. So we're also going to have a fact sheet after this that really goes through some of the ways that you, as a citizen and resident of Northwest Indiana, can protect biodiversity in your own backyard. So without further ado, let's get started. So just a background about who we are. So Save the Dunes is an environmental advocacy organization that is based in Northwest Indiana. Our offices are in Michigan City. And our organization has been around for more than 70 years. What we do is we support policies and actions that protect not only the Indiana Dunes, Lake Michigan, but also all the natural surrounding areas and the people who live, work, and recreate in Northwest Indiana. And we do our work through conservation, advocacy, and community engagement. So just wanting to stop and ask how protecting biodiversity is to you. So if you are a citizen in Northwest Indiana, we always ask our community members what protecting biodiversity means to them and what are some examples of this in our region of Northwest Indiana. So when we talk to people about some biodiversity examples, of course, we ask them, because it's so biodiverse in our area, there's more than 10 different types of ecosystems in our 3 counties alone. What have they been doing? What practices do they go through? What practices do their neighbors go through? And what do they advocate for? So these are just some of the responses that we've gotten. And so we're going to go through that next. So, but just before we talk about our discussion about what protecting biodiversity means to you, I just wanted to stop and explain what we mean when we say the words coastal resiliency. So, coastal resiliency is a big word. I think a lot of people use it very easily, but it's very hard to define it, especially in our region. This is definitely our region specific definition. We came up with this definition when we were talking to a lot of our other partners who do conservation and advocacy work in Northwest Indiana. And this is our collective definition that we came up with, which is the ability to respond, withstand, and to adapt to the impacts of natural hazards within the Lake Michigan watershed region. And examples of this in our region specifically is, of course, green infrastructure, nature-based solutions for erosion issues, invasive species management, et cetera. Of course, there's a lot of other examples, but these are just some of the things that when we got together to understand what exactly coastal resiliency means in our region, these are some of the examples that we came up with. So with that frame, whenever we do ask this question to our community members, this is kind of some of the responses that we usually get. So when we ask them, what does protecting biodiversity mean to you and how does it help with coastal resiliency? Getting these responses, we usually get responses like, educating and sharing our relevant conservation materials. Our organization has a really, really great Living in the Dunes Volume 2 guide. We call it our pollinator guide that goes through best practices for gardeners in Northwest Indiana. It has a list of native plants and pollinators that, you can attract to your own backyard. Really trying to encourage people to plant natives instead of invasives. Non-natives is a really big a focus of ours. Another thing that we hear a lot is deepening the conservation knowledge. So just not only educating yourself and others around you, but really making sure that you are able to deepen your own knowledge and really go further than just the surface. Planting natives, like I said, making our ecosystems more resilient to extreme weather patterns. That's a huge one. So native plants are by far way more resilient, especially in our region. They can really sustain and withstand these really extreme weather patterns that have been increasing in later years. So really trying to encourage people to plant natives instead of non-natives is something that we're focusing on. And then, of course, examples of this, of protecting biodiversity in our region of Northwest Indiana includes planting natives, but also removing any invasive species, not only in your backyard, but something that our organization focuses on is helping our partners, such as the national park, with their invasive species removal as well. And then advocating for more conservation protections and funding. So something that we always advocate for every year is the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative funding. So making sure that there's enough money for all of the conservation work in our region to have funding. So to make sure that these projects are able to actually, get done and kick off the ground. So. Okay, so next I just want to reiterate where the Lake Michigan watershed is. So we did kind of talk about that in the coastal resiliency definition. I mentioned that this definition specifically is for the Lake Michigan watershed. So this is a picture or a map of the Lake Michigan watershed. So thank you again. This is a DNR map. Thank you for our LMCP folks for sending this over to us. But this is a really great map, not only because it shows all the different counties and the lake, but also because it shows a lot of these different tributaries or creeks and ditches and rivers that eventually not only connect to each other, but also collect and then connect to the lake. So as you can see, this blue area is very big, and that is the Lake Michigan watershed region. So a lot of people don't usually think of themselves as part of a coastal community, but in fact, if you do live in these blue areas, you are part of the coastal community because of your adjacency or your proximity to one of these creeks or rivers or waterways. And doesn't only include all of the shoreline communities that are very much right next to the Lake Michigan area, but all the places that are south of that. So as you can see, Salt Creek, Coffee Creek, Trail Creek, these are all areas that not only connect to the lake eventually, but to all of the other communities that are definitely way more south than the Lake Michigan shoreline in Indiana. So just making sure that everyone understands that you are definitely part of this coastal community. It is not just the shoreline communities that are part of this area, but you are as well. And so if you are interested, I do encourage you to check out some of our other presentations. So this Friday, we had our Protecting Biodiversity hike at the National Park in Paul Douglas Center. But we will have one coming up now at about shoreline erosion. And that's going to be virtual. It's going to be on November 21st at 5:30. We're going to have two scientists from the Great Lakes Regional Institute talk about shoreline erosion and kind of what they've been experiencing and what best practices that we can establish in our region as well. Of course, all of these recordings are going to be on our YouTube channel. So, check out some of our past presentations if you weren't able to attend in person. So some of the ones that we did regarding coastal resiliency include living in the dunes, wetlands, and recreating responsibly. So I just want to talk about the pride of place. So what I mean by that is that we have a very biodiverse area. As I was talking about, we have more than 10 different ecosystems in the Northwest Indiana region. And of course, some of these natural areas include the National Park and the Indian Dunes State Park. So just some stats about the National Park. So the National Park is the only national park in our state of Indiana. So that's great. It is also the fourth most biodiverse park in the entire country with 10 different types of habitats. So that's something extremely unique and really, really rare. Our region has more than 1,000 plants and more than 300 bird species that visit per year. And because of that, and because of this vastness and biodiversity, we really have a role to play to protect the incredible biodiversity found in our region. So, pictured on the left here, we just have a couple of examples, but of course, there's many more examples of the type of species that you can find. So, if you're in in the Great Marsh, you can see some, blue herons. You can go and see some lupin in May in the Miller Woods, or some pitcher plants in Pinhook Bog. So, these, of course, you can see that they look very different, of course, especially the plants that we can find are extremely biodiverse and very different. And so because of this biodiversity, this is something that we need to protect. And because we live in this area, we have a responsibility and a role to play to help do that. So one of the biggest issues with the protection of our natural spaces in Northwest Indiana is, of course, fragmentation. That's something that we always talk to the national park about a lot. Is one of the hardest things to really maneuver around is this fragmentation issue. So when I say fragmentation, what we mean is there's a lot of large blocks of habitat or natural spaces that are unfortunately cut into smaller pieces, and kind of, diversified and spread out, and have development such as roads or housing or industry sprinkled into the middle of them. So this increased fragmentation, of course, there's a lot of different issues with that, but one of the biggest problems is it puts stresses on plants and animals and really hinders their migration and movement in nature, and impacts the ability of their environment to withstand threats such as flooding. So this is a picture of the national park. You could actually get this map if you go to the national park, or you pick up one of their welcome pamphlets. They have this map, and it really shows you all the different places that you can access in the national park. And then also a lot of these kind of white areas here, which are either communities or industries or roads, or basically development. And so just looking at this map, you can see that not everything is connected. Not all of the natural spaces are connected, unfortunately. And so that really does hinder not only the plants and animals, but also just the work that we have been doing with invasive species management, habitat restoration, what have you, because it is so fragmented. So that's one of the main issues that we have to deal with in our area. Okay, so just talking about protecting biodiversity and coastal resiliency a little bit more, and why those two really do connect. Because, as we said, many plant and animal species struggle to move between natural areas because of this fragmentation. So if it's, not only being broken up by roads, but also development, industry, communities, what have you, we really try to encourage people to try and kind of help with this. And the way that we ask people to help with this is to consider making some safe spaces in your backyards, to create your own habitat for these species to thrive, and not, have any areas or pockets that they might need these necessities, these essential things such as food, water, what have you. So a great example for people who live in Northwest Indiana is maybe consider creating a pollinator garden, creating your own wetlands, your own ponds in your backyard, what have you. A lot of these species, such as, monarchs, pictured here, or our turtles, they need these areas to not only survive, but also breed and have their young, and have a safe place for them to feel protected. If we don't have these places, our species are really going to be in peril. So this is something that we really do want to encourage. So continuing along with coastal resiliency and how that corresponds and really connects to protecting biodiversity. So as I said, there's a lot of habitat loss, unfortunately, that occurs due to a lot of the development and industry in our area. A lot of our wetlands, forests, and other ecosystems support the higher diversity of life in our region. And so when we lose them, or when we develop on these areas, we put into detriment not only these areas, not only these ecosystems, but the people and the species that need those ecosystems to survive. So for example, the blanding turtle that I had on the last screen, that needs a wetland to survive. So if we develop on those wetlands and, make sure that he doesn't have a place to go, then this is going to be really, really hard to sustain that type of species, and we're going to see that greater habitat loss. So plants, of course, act as resilient buffers to increasing storm events, and less diverse areas are also more vulnerable to climate change. So we were talking about planting natives, and of course, native plants really do act as better resilient buffers to our greater storm events. So over the last couple of years, with our increased weather patterns, and them not only being more prevalent, but also harder, there's stronger storms now than ever before. It is really, we encourage people to plant natives and really think about not developing and trying to sustain or increase the biodiversity in your own backyard. So invasive species is, of course, something that would help with that as well, like getting rid of invasive species rather. So non-native plants that infest natural areas and cause environments or economic harm or harm to human health are not good, of course. So we don't want invasive species. They can create a lot of monocultures that do not support diversity of life. Of course, having a lot of diverse plants and animals is good, especially if you think about all the different types of ecosystems we have, and with these stronger storms and things like that, we want to not encourage a monoculture. We want to have a lot of different species so that we have a better chance, and not only in these ecosystems, but also in our communities, to really withstand these stronger storms. So how can you help? So we kind of talked a little bit about this, but as a citizen of Northwest Indiana, there are a couple of things that you can do. Of course, the first thing I think is education. So really familiarizing yourself and removing any invasive species from your property is the biggest thing you can do, because of the fragmentation, because of the habitat loss, and because of the development in our area. So creating your own natural habitats is a great way to do that. So as I said, animals really need these natural habitats to not only raise their young, but drink water, find food, and have shelter options. So really creating these environments in your own area would be fantastic. Also increasing and supporting any green infrastructure projects in your town, city, or community. So that can be anything from, semi-permeable areas, really trying to understand that, of course, we do need development, but how do we think about it in a smarter way and support these green infrastructure projects over these places that don't really have green space? And of course, building healthier ecosystems. So choosing native plants for your garden over invasive species or non-natives is a great way not only to make your backyard more resilient, but to increase the resiliency of the entire ecosystem. And some things that we ask that you do not do. Very much not introducing new species into the ecosystem. This is a huge, huge issue, especially here. We were talking about invasive species for a long time. And so, there are more than 100 different invasive species just in Miller Woods. So, just making sure that we don't introduce any new invasive species into the ecosystem is really important. So some examples of that is, making sure that you don't put any live bait into the waterways, removing seeds from protected natural spaces. Please don't do that. Not releasing your pets into the wild, as they can introduce new predators and disrupt ecosystems, and then not planting invasive species on your property. So these are just some of the examples of how you can help as a resident in Northwest Indiana. One of the most alarming stats that we discovered was that outdoor cats kill birds at an alarmingly high rate, with the estimated 1.3 to 4 billion killed annually, and mammal mortality likely between 6.3 to 22.3 billion individuals. So that's a huge, huge problem, especially in Northwest Indiana, with more than 300 different species of birds coming into our region around May. So Something we really want to encourage is if you do have pets and you let them out in your backyard, please do keep an eye on them. We don't want to have them really, be detrimental to the natural ecosystems that we live in. And just being mindful of that would really help.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning in for our Coastal Resiliency Protecting Biodiversity presentation with our great advocacy coordinator, Harshini. Here are a couple of ways that you can stay in touch with Save the Dunes. We are active on social media platforms. You can follow us on Instagram at Save the Dunes. And you'll also find us on Facebook. You can like and follow us there at Save the Dunes. We post all of our upcoming events, current advocacy actions, and ways that you too can help save the dunes. Another great way to get connected and stay in touch is signing up for our newsletter, which you can find on our website, which also is a great resource with all of our other free resources that you can print, download, and share at your leisure. So thank you everyone for tuning in for this presentation.
Awesome. Well, as Em said, thank you all. I just want to say a big thank you again to our partners at NOAA and at the Indiana Dunes Department of Natural Resources and Lake Michigan Coastal Program for giving us this grant and allowing us to talk about coastal resiliency topics. And I just put my email at the top just in case anybody has any questions or concerns about anything we talked about. Would love to hear from you and talk about this more. So thank you, everyone.